And so he decided to hop a freight train and just leave the plantation. So he left obviously with no education, and he landed on the streets of Fort Worth, Texas, and that's the first place that the freight train stopped. And so he got off, and there he was. He didn't know how to fill out an application. He didn't know how to apply for a job. He just started living on the streets and eating his meals at a homeless mission. That's how he became homeless, and stayed that way for more than 20 years. He lived on the streets.
Staten Islander News is here today with Ron Hall. Ron Hall is the best-selling author of Same Kind of Different as Me, which was also made into a film. He also co-authored What Difference Do It Make and Workin Our Way Home with Denver Moore, a former slave and homeless man that he lived with for 10 years. And Ron Hall is also from Texas. He's also an international art dealer and entrepreneur. Ron did not always work with the homeless, and we're here to learn more about his work in Texas and nationally to bring recognition to their plight and to help people recognize that they are human just like us, deserving of dignity, respect, and love. So, good morning, Ron. It's good to have you with us.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me on your show.
So I wanted to start with if you could just kind of tell us a little bit about yourself and how you started working with homeless people.
Well, I think you told him a little bit about myself. I've been an art dealer most of my life. I became an author by default because I had a great story to tell and no one else to write it. So that is the reason that I wrote my first book. But I became active with the homeless mainly because of my late wife, and she had a literal dream about a homeless man who would change our lives in our city. And so she asked me to go into the inner city to find this man of her dreams because she thought this dream was a spiritual dream. She thought it was from God, and she knew from her dream she had seen the man's face, and she knew that if we could actually find this man and see him, that her dream would be from God and it would be life changing for us. So the morning after her dream, when she said it was like a verse in Ecclesiastes of the Bible 9:14, where Solomon wrote, "There was found in the city a certain poor man who was wise, and by his wisdom the city was changed, yet no one knew his name." And so, with that information, we started walking the streets of Fort Worth, Texas on that morning in 1998. So,
Oh, nice. Um, and so you actually were able to find him and you found out his name, or she actually the book said that she used to call him something else other than his actual name.
oh, yes, yes. She called him Dallas because she thought that might be his name. She'd heard something like that. But his name was Denver. And no, we didn't find him on that first day. We searched all day and we walked the streets where most of the homeless live. In Fort Worth, Texas, where this actually took place, there was about a 7 or 8 square block area where most homeless lived in their homeless camps. It's not like New York where they're everywhere. Here they were concentrated in a few block areas. So we walked those streets and we didn't see him. And by the end of the day, we decided, or she decided, she said, well, there's a homeless mission over here. It was just kind of like an old cinder block flop house soup kitchen. And she said, let's go over there and volunteer. And, they serve most of the homeless and they serve 3 meals a day. And if we stay there long enough, and he is really the man of my dreams, one day he will come through there and I will recognize him. So we began serving an evening meal that afternoon at the homeless shelter, and we started serving it just once a week then. And by the end of the second week, we were there serving the evening meal. We were behind a stainless steel serving counter and getting ready to serve the meal. The men were exiting from a chapel service. They had to listen to a gospel message before they got a free meal. And as we were waiting for the men to come in the line, all of a sudden, in a door that nobody's supposed to be coming in storms this, what I thought was a giant looking man. He had on no shirt and no shoes, and just some raggedy old unzipped breeches. And he's screaming at the top of his lungs, I'm going to kill whoever done it. I'm going to kill whoever stole my shoes. And my wife said, "That's him. That's him." I said, "That's who?" She said, "That's the man in my dreams." And by then he was throwing punches at everybody and overturning tables. And I've never been so scared in my life because I thought, wow, this man he's now threatening to kill everybody in the room. So I just fell down to my knees behind the stainless steel serving counter and kind of stuck my head in where the pots and pans normally would be. I was protecting myself, I thought. And all of a sudden, I still hear all this commotion and cursing, and I thought, I wonder what happened to Debbie, which was my late wife. And so I stick my head out and I said, she's all excited. She's jumping up and down like a cheerleader on the sideline of a football game. And she said, "That's him, that's him." And I said, "That's who?" And she said, "That's the man in my dream." And I said, "Which one?" And she said, "The one who's threatening to kill everybody." And then she looked down at me on my knees and she said, "And Ron, I believe that I heard from God that you have to be his friend and find out if my dream really is from God." And I looked back up at her and I said, "But Debbie, I was not at that meeting we had with God. And if I'm going to be friends with someone who wants to kill everybody, I think I should go talk to God myself." So that that night, I had a little talk with God. Well, anyway, back to that scene. I asked a homeless man who was serving with us on the line. I said, "Who is that crazy man?" He said, "Well, I don't know. He's been on the streets longer than anybody in Fort Worth, and nobody really knows his name. Some people call him the Lion of the Jungle, and others just call him Suicide because messing with him is the equivalent of committing suicide. The man's crazy and he'll hurt you. So I would just stay away from him." Um, that night I had a little talk with God, and though I didn't hear an audible voice, I know that God spoke to me just through my spirit, saying, "Being friends with a homeless man is a small price to pay for the forgiveness that Debbie and I have shown you, because I had been a bad husband and she had forgiven me for that. And I'd promised for that forgiveness I would do anything she asked me the rest of our lives together. And this was really the first thing she ever asked me to do after that circumstance. So I was all in. I said, "Okay, I'll do it, whatever you want me to do." So
Oh, that's cool. And over time, you ended up meeting who the person whose name is Denver. And would you want to tell us a little bit about how he became homeless and ended up in Texas? Because that's not where he was originally from.
well, he grew up on a plantation in Louisiana back in the late 30s and 40s, and back in those days, it was still not much above slavery. It was sharecropping and working for the man on plantations. Uh, he was African American. He had never been allowed, nor any of the children that grew up back then on the plantations were allowed to go to schools. There were no what they called colored schools back in those days. So education passed him by. He never had a chance to learn to read or write. And finally, in his when he was about 20 years old, he decided to escape the plantation because he had worked there forever, living in a shack with no running water or electricity, and working every day for the man and never getting paid. He just got credit at the man's store if he needed some food or something like that. And so he decided to hop a freight train and just leave the plantation. So he left obviously with no education, and he landed on the streets of Fort Worth, Texas, and that's the first place that the freight train stopped. And so he got off, and there he was. He didn't know how to fill out an application. He didn't know how to apply for a job. He just started living on the streets and eating his meals at a homeless mission. That's how he became homeless, and stayed that way for more than 20 years. He lived on the streets, moving around. Sometimes on winter nights, he would stay in the mission, but other times he would stay in what they called the hobo jungle. He would live under bridges. He would live on the steps of the churches, and people would, hopefully give him money or something. So,
Right. And I believe in one of the books it mentioned that one of the reasons why that ended up happening was because he didn't have a birth certificate or any kind of documentation of who he was
that's
to
true.
prove that he existed
That's
um, in this world, I guess, as you could
Well,
say.
in order to get community services and government assistance, you have to have an ID. And
Right.
so he had no ID and no way to find that out. That's one of the things that we helped him with when we finally became friends. I mean, it took me 5 months of continually pursuing him daily on the streets to actually get him in my car and go to breakfast one morning. And on that at that breakfast, I told him, I said, I know your name's not suicide. You mind telling me your name? And he said, No, I don't tell anybody my name. I'm not going to tell you my name. And I said, Oh, okay. I said, Well, my name is Ron Hall, in case you're interested. And uh, and he looked at me and he said, What is it you want from me? I said, Man, I just want to be your friend. And which was a lie. I didn't really want to be his friend. Debbie wanted me to be his friend, and I was doing this for her. And he looked at me with this incredulous look and he said, You want to be my friend? And I said, Yeah. He said, Man, I'm not looking for any friends. I'm gonna have to think about that. And I thought, Hey, buddy, you don't even know who you're talking to. You just licked a gift horse in the mouth. I mean, you're the man of my wife's dream, and we're rich and you're poor. And if whatever you want, I will do for you because my wife wants to make friends with you. And so, but a couple of days later, I saw him taking trash out of his dumpster. He lived by a dumpster in the inner city of Fort Worth. And he was taking trash out of the dumpster and feeding the wild animals on the street. And so I asked him to go get if he wanted to go get coffee. So he gets in my pickup and we go to a Starbucks. And he was on the way there. He starts screaming at me, Man, why don't you leave me alone? I've had no peace in my life since you and your skinny little wife showed up on the streets in Fort Worth. And I said, I would be happy to leave you alone, but my wife won't let me. I've got to become, your friend. So we get there, and he said, I've been thinking a lot about what you asked me. I said, What did I ask you that required any thought? And he said, Oh, you asked me if I would be your friend. And I said, Yeah, what do you think about that? He said, Well, to tell you the truth, there's something I heard about white folks that really bothers me, and it's got to do with fishing. I said, Well, Denver, I'm not a fisherman. I'm a art dealer, and I have a ranch, and I do cowboy things, but no, I don't go fishing. He said, But I bet you can answer the question. I said, Okay, then ask me the question. He said, Okay. He said, I heard when white folks go fishing, they do this thing they call catch and release. And I said, Oh, of course they do. Denver, it's a sport. You don't get it? He said, No, sir, I don't get it. Because back on the plantation where I grew up in Louisiana, we'd go out in the morning, we'd cut us a cane pole, we'd dig us a can full of worms. We would go sit on the riverbank all day. And when we finally got something on our line, we were proud of it. And so we would take it back to the plantation and share it with all the folks. He said, So it occurred to me, if you're a white man fishing for a friend and you gonna catch and release, then I ain't got no desire to be your friend. But if you are fishing for a real friend and you're not going to catch and release, then I'll be your friend for life. And I thought, wow, this is a poor man who is wise, because what he spoke to me was the wisest thing I'd ever heard on friendship. And my mind flashed back to Debbie's dream. I said, this had to be real. So I said, Okay, Denver, if you'll be my friend, I'll not catch and release. And at that moment, I realized that God was about to rewrite my life story and repaint the canvas of my life. So,
Right, right. And that would actually be like a fish that you would take home and keep.
yeah, that's right. I did not catch and release. So,
Right. So, I wanted to kind of see if you had any stories that of other people that you know of through your meeting Denver and meeting the other people there, of people who fell into homelessness, like where and I think it's most of them. but just any stories that you'd like to share.
I have one of my favorite ones is after I became friends with Denver and I started walking the streets with him. I One day I stopped and I had $100 bill in my pocket and I stopped by a bank and I got $101 bills. And I thought I'm just going to go out and bless the homeless. Denver had taught me the difference between helping the homeless and blessing the homeless were two vastly different things. Helping the homeless, he said, you have to crawl down in the ditch with them. And when they're strong enough to crawl out on your back, then you helped them. If you just give a man $1 or a plate of spaghetti, you're blessing him, but you're not helping him. But that day I decided with this $100, I would go bless the people on the street and give them $1 or two so they could get a hamburger or whatever else they wanted to do with this dollar. And probably by noon, we had passed out $100 to maybe close to 100 homeless people. And we came to the very end, and I had no more dollar bills. And so, but there was one man that was laying up against a building, and he appeared to me to be so drunk that he could not get up on his feet. And so I walked by him and I just said, "Hey, sir, is there anything that I can do to help you?" And he said, "Yeah, a few dollars would be nice." Well, I reached in my pocket knowing that I didn't have any $1 bills, and I pulled out a 20. And I thought, oh, I'm not going to give the man a 20. So I stuck it back in my pocket. And Denver looked at me and he said, "Give the man the 20." And I said, "Well, Denver, I don't want to get a man already drunker than he already is. I don't want to damage his health any more than he's already damaged it himself." And he said, "You give the man the 20, and that's between him and God what he does with it. And you'll receive the blessing for giving it to him." And I said, "Okay." So I gave the man the 20 and I said, "God bless you." And we walked a few feet to the corner and he spun me around by my shoulders and looked me in the eye. And he said, "Mr. Ron, that man that you just judged, his name is Jose, and he's been living on the streets for several years. He moved here from Mexico to work, and he sends all of his money back to Mexico to take care of a large family." He said, the man doesn't drink and he doesn't do drugs." I said, "The man had a stroke and he can no longer work, and he can't get back to Mexico, and he's stuck here on the streets, just the way that you saw him today." And he said, so he flipped me around. He said, "What do you see at the end of the street down there?" I said, "I see the courthouse." He said, "You sure do, Mr. Ron. And that courthouse is full of judges, and God ain't looking for no more judges." He said, "God is looking for servants." He said, "So if you're going to walk the streets with me, don't ever judge these people again." He said, "Unless you know their heart and their story, you have no right to judge them." He said, "You come as a servant and leave your judge's robe hanging in your closet." So that was the story of Jose. And we helped Jose finally, get some health, some uh, therapy and rehabilitation for his surgery, I'm sorry, for his stroke. And then we got him, helped him get back to Mexico. So
Oh, that's very nice. I didn't know that you guys had done that for him. That's really cool.
yeah, well, there was another guy, one of the richest men in Fort Worth, son got into drugs. and and he went to rehabilitation several times and to drug rehab and always relapsed. And so finally the family just cut him off and put him out. So he was living on the streets, one of the richest men in Fort Worth. This kid had been a millionaire and he had gone through all of his millions with drugs. And so after about 10 or so years, we showed up at the mission and we got to know him and he had become now clean and sober. But he was living at the mission and he was helping other people go through and overcome some of the problems he had. And I didn't have a clue who he was. But one day he asked me if I knew his father, and he told me who his father was. I said, "Yes, I know him very well." He said, "I'm the son that was excommunicated because of drugs." And I said, "Boy, would you like to get back in touch with them?" He said, "Oh, I've tried. They've just cut me off, and I was just too bad." So, but eventually he did get back with his family. So
Oh, that's cool. And I know like one of the I think it was there was a study recently that showed that like a third of people who are homeless, like around 30% of them are that way because they didn't have a family or support system or anything like that to fall back on. And some people just they end up stumbling into, a bad situation.
Yeah.
Um like
Sometimes just
the
bad luck, just bad luck. You're living paycheck to paycheck and you lose your job and then
Mhm.
you can't pay the rent. They kick you out. You have no family, you have no friends, no place to go. You're out on the streets or going to a shelter. So, uh,
Right. And a lot of times the shelters, especially in New York City, here, like in the Bronx, from what people have reported on, have been are pretty bad. People can get hurt there worse than being on the street. They can get robbed and stuff like that. So it's I don't know if it's that way everywhere, but I know like in the Bronx,
it's
in New York it
probably
is.
everywhere. I was on the board of a national organization called Citygate, and we oversee about 350 of the largest missions around the country. And it's not like that in the missions that we serve. The missions are very well structured, organized, monitored. We teach accountability and responsibility. We don't put up with any drugs. Most people that are on the streets are there by choice because they don't want to be a part of something that holds them accountable and responsible. They want to go ahead and do their drugs or just live this free life that they're living. And it becomes a choice for them because the ones that really want help can get help. There are a lot of wonderful missions doing great things in the Bowery. I know all of this, and I've been in New York many times and spoken on behalf of the homeless, and they're doing a great job there. And the people that want help get it there. So
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. And so you were talking about someone who had previously been like a millionaire and they ended up falling into drugs.
yeah.
Because I know that happens a lot too. There was actually a woman who was on the subway in New York City. She ended up dying on the subway, but she had fallen into homelessness. She got involved with a person and they moved from Tom's River all the way down to Atlantic City, where she didn't know anybody. And then they ended up breaking up, and he ended up having gotten her into drugs. And then when she came to try to find her family again, they had just moved. And this was the woman who was killed on the train in the Bronx. There was a migrant person set fire to her.
Mhm.
And the odd thing, and kind of like the disturbing thing, and Curtis Sliwa had reported on this. I didn't watch the video myself, but he said that nobody tried to help her to put the fire out. And so she ended up dying from that. But she was from a good family. She was in a family in Tom's River, and she just kind of like I guess, lost her way in a sense.
Yeah.
And then she went to a shelter, and then she left the shelter, and she was just on the train, and it just ended up in her situation, it was bad luck also, like that, because she could have gotten out of it, potentially. Um, and give me 1 second. I just realized I have to plug this in. All right, sorry about that.
So,
And then there are some people who believe that homeless people are somehow at fault for their homelessness, and most of the people who say this have never actually met a homeless person or a low-income person. Would you be able to speak a little bit about that?
well, it is true. It is a lot of their faults, the ones that you see on the streets. But unless you sit down and have a talk with them and hear their stories, you would probably never understand. But once you get to know these people, you can understand maybe how they became homeless. A lot of it is mental illness. And years ago, the government shut down mental health hospitals for the ones that were the easiest ones to get rid of. The criminally insane, a lot of them are still housed in criminally insane type jails. But no, there's many, many, many circumstances. Every story is different, and there, there was Maya Angelou, the great poet. She said that there's no pain like the pain of carrying an untold story, and these people on the streets have untold stories that they're just would love for somebody to sit down and listen to them so that they could talk to them. That's one of the best things you can actually do for a homeless person is just to talk to them as a person and just show them a little empathy.
Right. And so if you could tell us a little bit about your organization's 7-point plan that gives individual people ways they can help the local homeless population by, like you had said before, like blessing them,
Yeah.
listening to them, kind of stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I have this foundation we call the Same Kind of Different as Me foundation.org, samekindfoundation.org. And we try to, through our foundation and website, try to make uh, the guide homeless people to find the shelter nearest them and the ways that we help them. That's the one of the greatest things you can do for a homeless person is to get them into a shelter where they have a roof over their head, they're getting meals, they're getting people there that actually care for them and engage them and teach them accountability and responsibility. But step one is just, first of all, asking them their name, making eye contact with someone and asking them their name. And that happened my first time with Denver, meeting him on the streets. And he told me one time, he said, Mr. Ron, you never know whose eyes God is watching you out of, and it's not going to be your preacher or your Sunday school teacher. He said, it might be a fellow that looks like me. And he said, but it ain't me, but it might be a fellow that looks like me. God's checking you out to see what kind of person you really are. So just showing an act of kindness to someone, say hello, ask their name. Most homeless people think that they're invisible because people don't want to make eye contact with them. And but my friend Denver told me one time, he said, you guys, meaning me, right? He said, y'all all think, look, y'all look at the homeless and you see a problem. He said, but when God looks at the homeless, he sees an opportunity for the faithful to show the love of God. So that's what, other than, God is looking at you, he knows what you're doing. But to show an act of kindness and showing the love of God is really what these people need. But first of all, you can if you carry with you little packs in your car that you can give them a bottle of water, just ask them their name. And just if you're stopping at a light and pull out this pack, maybe it has a meal ticket for McDonald's or a bus ticket so they can get a ride somewhere, but just some little blessing for them. That really a lot of times makes their day just to get a blessing. A dollar or two is I don't mind giving somebody 5 or 10 or 20. It doesn't matter. I've given them even 100 before, but they those kind of things is then I'd say just uh, offer to take them to a homeless shelter. Or get them a ride or call an Uber or get them a bus ticket to get them to a homeless shelter and make a call to a homeless shelter and say, this person really would like to get into a shelter. If you talk to them about a shelter and assure them that you're going to send them to a safe one, then they're more willing to go. But most of them will tell you, oh, I've already tried that and it doesn't work for me. But usually when they say that, it means that they can't do their drugs when they go to the shelter. They have to give up their knives and all the bad things that that you don't want to bring into a shelter like drugs. So, but one of the things that my friend Denver, when he spoke at my wife's funeral, he got up and he said, I was a bad man on the streets for more than 20 years. He said, I was a mean man. I was full of hell. And he said, but Miss Debbie, she kept blessing me and blessing me and blessing me. And she never gave up on me until she finally just blessed the hell right out of me. And so that's a good thing you can do. If you're going to be seeing this person on a regular basis, just bless the hell right out of them.
Um, and so what do you see as some of the ways to help the homeless lead dignified lives?
Well, in order to do that, you need to get them into a shelter where they can become a part of a program. And and every shelter has a program for people that want to participate in it. And there you're taught accountability, responsibility. They give you computer skills. They help you get a job. They help you with hygiene, with mental health problems, getting you medicated. They get you to where you're seeing doctors and you're getting your health in order. You have clothing, all of these kind of things that you dress them up, you give them a haircut. With women, you give them some makeup and some hair, and all of a sudden they can look in the mirror and say, "Wow, I didn't even know that person existed," and they start feeling good about themselves. But it takes love. My friend Denver used to say, food and shelter. I mean, a hot meal and shelter over your head is not going to change your life, but love will make a difference. So when people start showing them love, that makes all the difference in the world. And most of that time, that occurs within the shelters. And then eventually they find their way where they can get on their feet again. And then they're ready to move back into the real world where they can make a difference in someone's lives. So,
Right, right. And I know like at the Vatican in Vatican City, one of the things that I learned about that they did after the Pope's passing was that they installed showers for homeless people in Vatican City that they could use anytime. And they also instituted free haircuts and hairstyling and all that stuff on Wednesdays from local barbers in the
yeah,
area. And also, we learned recently in New York City, I'm not sure if it's nationwide, the Girl Scouts have a troop called Troop 6000, and it's in the homeless shelters in New York City. And they get to do all of the things that Girl Scouts do, which cost money usually, like, when they go on their trips and stuff like that, they have to either raise the money from selling cookies or they have to pay for it themselves. So the girls in the homeless shelters actually get to do that by themselves to help build, from what they say is courage, confidence, and character is what the Girl Scouts try to build in kids. Um, and can you tell us a little bit about your experiences with Denver after Debbie's death, which are kind of described in the second two books, not the ones that were made into the movie? So the What Difference Do It Make seems like it was a lot of letters written to you guys.
right. Yeah, it was just people that were responding to us saying, "We read your book and we decided to do this." And which was one of the most wonderful things to hear that, I mean, first of all, millions of people read our books, and many of them decided to go out and make a difference in their community. And we heard those kind of stories. Then, most people don't realize that if they just saw the movie or read the first book, same kind of different as me, or saw the movie, same kind of different as me, they it ends kind of with Debbie's death, and they don't realize that Denver, the homeless man, moved in with me, and we lived under the same roof for the next more than 10 years. And we set out to make a difference and to build homeless shelters or remodel homeless shelters. We helped raise more than $100 million for the homeless in the next 10 years while he was alive. And we did over 1,000 appearances where we were doing fundraisers for the homeless, like we're doing today. Is we hope somebody will get involved and want to make a difference in their community. And so, he actually lived with me. He became a millionaire from book royalties. He became a millionaire from selling paintings. He got paid $10,000 to give speeches. And, I know that just what I don't know what would have happened if Debbie had not had the dream to Denver. No telling what would have happened to him. But because of Debbie's faithfulness to follow her dream and engage me to do the same thing, I know that a person who seemed hopeless, that was known as suicide, became a number one New York Times best-selling author. He became also an illustrator and illustrated his own children's book. We have a children's book called Same Kind of Different as Me for Kids, where he illustrated the book. He became a public speaker where he got paid $10,000 a speech for that. Uh, he, uh, he well, like I said, became a millionaire, and he gave all the money back to the homeless. And he did wonderful things. He was honored at the White House. Uh, and I know that the Bush family honored him at the White House as being the philanthropist of the year in the city of Fort Worth. And when he stood up to receive his award, he said, "A lot of y'all out here in the audience thought I was just trash on your streets." He said that y'all know that God is in the recycling business. God can turn trash into treasure. And he said, I want to thank you for this reward that you gave me. But what used to be trash on your streets is now your treasure. So that was a wonderful thing. And then when we were at the White House with the Bush family, and when we were leaving, he started laughing. And I said, "What's so funny, Denver?" He said, "Just think about this, Mr. Ron. I done gone from living in the bushes to eating with the bushes." He said, "God bless America. This is a great country." I said, "Yes, it is." But there are still millions of homeless people out there that need a Miss Debbie that will help them, get to the next step in life. So,
Right. Yeah, that was actually the one of the three books that I liked the best was the one where everybody wrote in to tell you about what they had done for homeless in their community.
yeah,
Like there was this one woman who saw two homeless gentlemen and she gave them each $20 and they ended up he turned his life around and he found out I don't know how he found out where she lived, but he came and he you know thanked her for was just talking about when we got cut off. We were just talking about there was a woman who had blessed two homeless men with $20 and one of them came to her house to tell her about how that had changed his life.
yes. Well, that happened because in the book, in that book, she was telling the story. She had just read our book about homelessness, and she had told her son that she had just read this book about homelessness, and they were pulling in their alley one day right after she read the book, and she had told her son, "The next homeless person that we see, we're going to do something nice for, because I read this book, Same Kind of Different as Me." Well, they pull in the alley from the grocery store, and all of a sudden, the son said, "Well, let's give them the groceries, that we just bought." And so she gave him some groceries, some food, and then she went in the house and she thought, well, she looked in her purse and she had two $20 bills. And she said, "I'm going to go give these two guys a $20 bill and bless them." So she goes back and she gives them a $20 bill. That's the last she heard of it. Didn't, it was months later. This man knocks on her door and he said, "Lady, I am one of the two men that you gave a $20 bill to in your alley uh, months ago." And he said, "I want to tell you how you turned my life around and that $20 changed my life." And she said, "Okay." So he said, "I took that 20 that you gave me and I went to the bar down the street and I was drinking. I got me a couple of beers and I was sitting at the bar, and the lady that worked there looked at me and she said, 'Well, you're obviously a homeless person. Where did you get $20 to come in here and start drinking in our bar?'" And so he told the story about how he was the wayward son. He had not seen his parents in years, and they had kicked him out of the house. And she said, well, why don't you go home and reconnect with your parents? And he said, oh, no, they would never like me to do that. She said, oh, let's try. She said, I'm going to buy you a bus ticket. So the lady in the bar now took him down to the bus station. She bought him a bus ticket and put him on a bus back to his home, somewhere in Washington state. So he said he got home and the family received him like the prodigal son. He got clean and sober. And so he came back to, I think, to Seattle to thank the woman that had bought him the bus ticket at the bar. And so they started dating because now he's clean and sober and has a job. They started dating. They end up getting married. And so then they go back to tell the lady, your $20 that you gave me in the alley, you meant it for good. I used it for something else, but God blessed it and it set off a chain of events that really changed my life. And I'm here to thank you for that $20 and how that one act of kindness, the ripple effect, you will never know the ripple effect of an act of kindness. It just keeps going on and on and on. And that's what we hoped to accomplish with our story, same kind of different as me. And that's why we were telling those stories in that book, Working, uh, same
So what difference do it make one? You talking about?
to it make
Yeah,
it.
that
I've
one's
written so many books now that so I can't.
yeah, so I mean, we actually had also talked with, I'm not sure if you ever read anything by Professor Edelman. He was the lawyer for Robert F. Kennedy, the one who was killed.
Okay.
And he also worked for President Bill Clinton. And he had visited the South um, and kind of saw what poverty and homelessness looked like there. And it kind of shaped a lot of his own feelings about like law and how like all the little fines and fees and all the little oh wait, this thing just came up here. All the little nickel and diming that the legal system does, and like for tickets and cars and all these other things. And then I don't know if you heard about in Oregon, they had a law where it was kind of part of the criminalization of homelessness where which Professor Edelman had talked about, and then kind of happened in real life through the Supreme Court, where in Oregon they had for sleeping on the street, the fine was $250 for the first offense. For a homeless person with no job, no income, no $250
Yeah,
to pay it back, and the Supreme Court actually said that that was a reasonable fee. What actually Justice Gorsuch said, which is just like kind of insane. I don't
yeah,
know what else to say
yeah,
about that. You could say like $10 or something like that, but to have a fine like that and that was upheld kind of puts into question a lot of things that are happening around the country with other laws like that, where they've been criminalizing homelessness. I don't think they do that in Texas, right? They don't have like fines like that. But that kind of seems to be the way that some states are choosing to deal with their homeless problem is by making it a crime and putting the people into jail for not being able to pay the fines.
yeah.
Um, and there's also a movie that we're going to probably be reviewing sometime in the near future called No Address. I'm not sure if you've seen that. It's like a kind of like a documentary of homeless
I've
people.
heard of it. I heard it. I've not seen it, but that's true.
And then I guess what is yeah, I had asked about your experiences with Denver after Debbie's death. And you were talking about kind of like living with him and how he became Philanthropist of the Year also,
Yes.
which is really pretty amazing. And you said he gave the money to like the missions and the homeless in Texas.
He gave all over. He he felt so empowered with having money now from the royalties of the book. My royalties for the book went to build a new homeless mission that we named after Debbie in Fort Worth, Texas, the Fort Worth Union Gospel Mission, and with the Deborah Hall Chapel. But he went to himself because he said, "This what I want to do with this is I want to bless people that need a blessing." So he would go to the streets and bless people, go to the poor neighborhoods and that people needed repairs on their homes. He would take them to Home Depot or Lowe's and buy all the materials and then hire someone to repair their homes. Uh, he would fix their cars. If they needed a car fixed, he would buy them things, cars or whatever. He just felt like Santa Claus, where he could go bless people. He had so much fun giving away, his royalties, and he never paid taxes on it because he said, I've lived my whole life, with no money, and now I have money, and you tell me I got to pay taxes. And I said, yeah, you got to pay taxes. He said, I'm not going to pay taxes. He said, because I'm not going to live long enough for them to catch me, for one thing. But he said, I can do better with this money and helping people that need it than the government can if I give it to them. So I'm going to bless the people that really need it because the government's just going to waste it, and I'm going to give it to the people that really need it. So he did. And so when we were having lunch with the Bush family at the White House, uh, he said, he said, y'all have a real nice house up here. He was telling Laura and President Bush. And she said, oh, Denver, it's not our house. It's your house too. He said, no, it ain't my house. I ain't never had no house. And she said, well, you know what I mean? It belongs to all the taxpayers. He said, I ain't paid y'all no taxes either. So it ain't my house. So he was very straightforward about that, but he ended up, blessing hundreds of people and had a wonderful. It just enriched his life greatly to be able to give back to the homeless and the poor, just from the royalties from our book and from the money from his art. He sold over 500 paintings, so it became um, I guess his real joy in life was giving away. So, because he lived with me the whole time and his living expenses were free and paid for by me. So he had nothing to do with the money except give it away. So,
Oh, that's very cool. And what do you think is the most important thing for people to understand about homelessness?
well, the most important thing I think is that just to understand that there is a person there that, except by the grace of God, goes you or I, with the wrong things happening to you and the situations, where any of us, I guess, if we got afflicted with a disease or where we lost our family, where an accident or anything to cause us to become homeless, you know, they were just normal people before they become homeless sometimes. And if you're not crazy or mentally ill when you become homeless, you probably will be not longer after that because, living on the streets and living as a homeless person can cause mental illness. It's a challenge to exist every day, and you can go crazy doing that. But just to look at people and look at them and with an eye that when you see them that you ask a question. I mean, most people when they see the homeless, they say, "I wonder what would happen to me if I stopped to help that person." They're asking themselves that. What's going to happen to me if I stop to help that person? I would love for people to start looking at the homeless and saying, "What's going to happen to them if I don't stop and help them?" And then just stop and find out what they can do. One little act of kindness that day to a homeless person. So, and
Right.
just hear their story.
Hmm.
That's that the homeless love to tell their stories, and nobody wants to sit and listen. They have these untold stories that just cause great pain in their lives.
Right. Yeah, and there's actually I think it's the mission in New York City, the one that you mentioned. I think it's the Bowery
Valerie,
mission
yeah.
has their Don't Walk By event every year where they don't walk by the homeless. And I guess that's kind of what their message is when you see a homeless person, to think about what you can do, how you can help, even if it is, like you said, giving them a meal ticket or an actual meal. There was a person who has YouTube videos who goes to the ferry, the Staten Island ferry, where there used to be a lot of homeless people, and he goes to McDonald's first and he buys like a bunch of cheeseburgers and a bunch of hamburgers, and he just gives them out to all of the homeless people who were there, because that used to be, I'm not sure if it still is, someplace that homeless people stay, but it did used to be before they renovated it.
Yeah. Yeah, I used to go to this fried chicken place. And I would buy 100 or 200 pieces of fried chicken in these big buckets and take it down to the street and some hot fried chicken. Wow, I loved that. So, yeah,
Yep, definitely. And you actually mentioned that when you uh, when you were first saw Denver, that he was actually going in the dumpster to get food for the animals.
yeah,
Was he feeding like the squirrels, the dogs, or what?
yeah.
He was just
Dogs and cats and birds, just putting out dumpster food and but yeah, they're all wild dogs and a lot of more cats than dogs and
right, right. And then yeah, that was kind of like all of the questions that I had. Is there anything else that you wanted to add today?
uh hmm, I don't know. I just love to honor my friend Denver that he was he taught me a lesson. He told me one day, right before he died, he said, "Mr. Ron, do you know that God's done struck me colorblind?" And I said, "Yes, what are you talking about?" He said, "Well, I used to just look at you and I would see a rich white man. And now when I look at you, I just see my friend." And I thought, wow, that's wonderful because we had gotten to the point where we really became colorblind. We were just brothers, kind of brothers in Christ, where we just loved each other and appreciated. And we went through a lot of difficult times. I mean, when you take a schizophrenic, bipolar, ex-con killer that's illiterate into your home and expect him to obey and be accountable and responsible and be on time. I mean, when he first moved in, he had the hardest time, even though he was living in my house. He would go fall asleep and forget that we had to leave for an appointment or something. And he said, "Mr. Ron, I've lived my whole life with no place to go and plenty of time to get there. And now you got to tell me I got to be on time. I don't even know what time is. Time doesn't mean anything to me." So, just he learned to overcome. And then all of a sudden, you saw these little glimpses of hope where he knew, oh my gosh, I can do things. I can do this. I learned to read and he learned to write and, just on a third grade level, probably. But he was so proud of himself and so encouraged by that. And that just really blessed me to know, to see him just excel after being, considered just trash on the streets for years. Now to see a human being that was making a difference in the world and through his life and through his ministry that he ended up having on the streets. So he said it's his theme and message when it's not the color of our skin that divides us, it's the condition of our hearts. And so if we all get our hearts in the right place, then there's there's no color that would divide us. So,
Right, right. Well, I mean, that's yeah. Well, it was really, really great to speak with you today.
yeah.
And yeah, I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us. That was really, really nice.
Thank you.
Really
It's a
glad that
pleasure.
everything that happened to you with this person kind of changed your life and kind of made it go in a completely different direction that you would have, I guess, never expected.
It's true. I mean, it was not what I was looking for. I remember when Debbie was dying of cancer, and I was wondering, what am I going to do to start my life over, and who will I start my life over with? And then all of a sudden, her final words to me were, "Please don't give up on Denver. God is going to bless your friendship in a way you could never imagine." And so then, when after she died, he moved in with me, and then for the next 10 years, that's who I started my life over with. And it
Right,
was
right,
it was the most meaningful thing I've ever done. And my legacy, I had just sold when she died. I had just sold one of the world's greatest and most famous modern sculptures, a 40-foot tall, 16-ton sculpture by Alexander Calder to the president of Microsoft. And I thought, this is going to be my legacy now. I've just sold a great masterpiece, and it's now in downtown Seattle. It's a gift to the city of Seattle. But all of a sudden, a homeless man comes into my life, and my legacy is now that Denver was my friend, and that's what people know me for. Other than if I sold whatever to if I sold the Mona Lisa to the Pope, uh, I will always be known as the guy that became Denver's friend, and that's my legacy, and I'm very, very happy with that. That God brought Denver into my life to to make me look at life in a different way. So,
oh, awesome. Well, thank you so much. It was really nice to talk with you today.
how did you ever find out about Same Kind of Difference as Me? How did you?
Uh, I read the book like 5 or 6 years ago,
Okay.
and then I read the other books afterwards. But I saw it at the end of the book that and I wanted to watch the movie. I have the movie. I haven't watched it. Just haven't had time to watch the movie itself. But the book was very probably more detailed anyway. And I
Yes.
really liked the book a lot. And I have talked to other people about it that have also read it. It's a very widely read book, and it kind of really puts it into a different kind of perspective. It's a different way of seeing the homeless people as real people, which
Yeah.
is something that, and Professor Edelman had mentioned that most people have never met a homeless person or a low income person and actually been friends with them. Like working class people hang out with working class people, which are other working people. They don't
Yeah.
usually get to see the people who work 80 hours a week and either live out of their car or share a room or stuff like that, which is, the closest step away from homelessness. But what Professor Edelman had said is it's difficult for people to empathize with the homeless and with people who are low income because they've never met one and they don't know what it could be like and they've never talked to someone like in that kind of a situation. So, um, and that kind of conversation with him, which was actually in two segments, was kind of changed a lot of my perspective too, because I was like, yeah, you've who would I know that's like in that kind of a situation?
Yeah.
Like I don't know anybody like that myself. And most of our readers don't know somebody like that either. So it's really critical to have like the stories of the people who have met someone like that and can share their experience and help you to empathize with them. Because, like you said before, that's one of my favorite quotes is, but for the grace of God, there goes oneself.
Yeah.
Like how do you know what that person went through unless you talk to them
Yeah.
and you ask them about it? Like, and most people just get so, especially with homeless people, they get like scared or they think that that they don't want to be close to them, so it's kind of difficult. But like there are a lot of homeless people who do clean their clothes and are cleaner than others, in some situations. So, and even that, like just to talk to somebody doesn't require, anything more than that.
Yeah. That's true. Well, thank you for taking an interest in this and making a difference yourself. You were making a difference by focusing and bringing to the attention of your readers and listeners how they can make a difference. So,
Yeah, which is, it's especially with all of the bad news that we hear about all of the cuts that are about to happen and stuff, it's going to become more important for individual people to make a difference because now there isn't that, thing that's taking care of people that was there before in a
Yeah.
lot of situations. So, like we had done an article about food pantries and what if everyone did that? Which is the title of another book. It's a children's book um, about what if you just, every time you went to the store, you picked up 2 cans of food. And if you're going to ShopRite on Staten Island, you can just bring it to the customer service counter and they will deliver it to the food pantry for you. So you don't even have to inconvenience yourself going anywhere out of your way.
Yes, I'm involved in a project right now. We're doing the beta testing here in Dallas, but we hope to take it nationwide, even worldwide. And it's called Eats Food Rescue. So it's EETZ, where we rescue food, and it's on an app. It's like an Uber app where we rescue food from one place and we post it on the app where then you can get this food. You have so much time to pick it up. And so the people in your neighborhood or wherever can see, oh, there's the Pizza Hut down there has 10 pizzas that people didn't pick up. And so a homeless person, even all homeless persons mostly have cell phones, and it pops up on their app, free food here, and so this is we're hoping to get that because there's millions of tons of food that go into the to dumpsters and go into landfills every year that is still good food that can be rescued. So we're rescuing food, and we give it to food pantries, and we give it to homeless shelters. We give it to individuals if they're in the neighborhood and want it. So it's called Eats Food Rescue, Eats Rescue. So you can look that up. It's the founder of that could be an interesting interview.
Yeah.
Eats Food
Yeah,
Rescue.
there's actually an app here in New York City where you have to pay for it, but it's a discounted thing, and it's kind of like the same idea of like it's an app, and you go and you can buy like a dozen bagels or 14 bagels that are from made in the morning or maybe the day before, and you get them for like a quarter the price.
Yeah.
So here it's
This
not
is
that
free.
that one's not free. We
Yeah,
we want we would love to have the free one. That would be great,
yeah, the free
actually.
one is great. Yeah. So anyway, check it out. So
Definitely will. All right. Thank you so much. It was great to speak to you, Ron. Have a great rest of your day.
do. Bye bye.
Thank you.